Today is Monday, February 2nd, 2026. The time is 7 p.m. Eastern. Welcome to Geopolitical Updates from AGI Era. A significant shift has emerged in the protracted humanitarian crisis gripping Gaza as Israel announced the reopening of the Rafah border crossing with Egypt. This decision, following almost 2 years of closure, marks a critical, albeit limited, moment for the besieged Palestinian enclave. Initial reports indicate a highly restricted flow, allowing only dozens of individuals, primarily those in urgent need of medical attention, to pass each day. Crucially, the movement of goods remains severely curtailed. This development comes after immense international pressure and is being closely watched for its immediate implications on the humanitarian situation within Gaza, where access to essential supplies and medical care has reached dire levels. The controlled nature of the reopening, however, raises questions about its true impact and whether it represents a genuine easing of the blockade or a carefully managed concession designed to alleviate external scrutiny without fundamentally altering the status quo for the vast majority of Gaza's inhabitants. The world observes anxiously to see if this aperture provides a genuine pathway to relief or merely a trickle in the face of overwhelming demand. Turning our attention to Eastern Europe, Ukraine has lauded Elon Musk's recent decision to restrict Russia's access to Starlink services. Kyiv reports real results from this measure, noting that Starlink-enabled drones have been implicated in a series of recent deadly attacks carried out by Russia. This move by the private satellite internet provider represents a notable intervention in the ongoing conflict, impacting Russia's battlefield capabilities and potentially altering tactical dynamics in critical areas. The dependency of modern warfare on advanced technology continues to evolve, with private entities like Starlink playing an increasingly significant role in geopolitical outcomes. In a separate development impacting regional stability, 80 Nigerian citizens who were kidnapped last month from 3 churches in northern Kaduna State have reportedly returned home after successfully escaping their captors. This brings a measure of relief to the affected communities and highlights the persistent challenge of mass abductions in Nigeria, which has plagued several northern states for years. The details of their escape remain sparse, but their return offers a glimmer of hope amidst a deepening security crisis that continues to displace thousands and disrupt daily life across the region. Shifting to the Asia-Pacific, Beijing has publicly criticized the Dalai Lama's recent Grammy win, characterizing it as a manipulation. The Buddhist spiritual leader was recognized in the audiobook category for his meditations. This condemnation underscores the Chinese government's long-standing position regarding the Dalai Lama, whom they consider a separatist, and reflects the sensitive nature of any international recognition or platform afforded to him. The move reinforces the ongoing diplomatic tensions between China and nations or organizations that acknowledge the Dalai Lama's spiritual authority. Moving to Latin America, Costa Rica has concluded its presidential election with Laura Fernández securing an outright victory in the first round. Her success is attributed to a platform tough on crime, resonating with voters amidst growing concerns over a rise in organized criminal activity within the country. This electoral outcome signals a potential shift in the nation's domestic policy priorities, emphasizing security and law enforcement as key governmental functions in response to evolving societal challenges. Meanwhile, the West African political landscape is undergoing significant realignments. After 3 West African juntas, those in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, solidified their pivot towards Russia, the U.S. has indicated a readiness to engage with them. This signals a noteworthy shift in American foreign policy, where the restoration of democratic governance appears to be deprioritized in favor of maintaining diplomatic ties and counteracting Russian influence in the region. This strategic recalibration underscores the complex geopolitical competition for influence across the African continent. Finally, Ghana has announced the suspension of its citizenship process for individuals of African descent. Since 2016, a policy has allowed those who can demonstrate their African ancestry to acquire Ghanaian nationality. The temporary halt in this initiative suggests a review or reassessment of the program's parameters or implementation, potentially impacting a significant number of individuals seeking to establish roots in the West African nation. The reopening of the Rafah border crossing, a critical artery between Gaza and Egypt, represents a nuanced and fragile development in the ongoing humanitarian crisis. While the British Broadcasting Corporation reported on the reopening as a significant event, highlighting the potential for dozens of Palestinians to cross daily, particularly for medical reasons, a deeper dive into reports from Al Jazeera reveals a more restrictive reality and a palpable sense of skepticism within Gaza itself. Al Jazeera's reporting emphasizes the severe limitations imposed on the crossing. Far from a full reopening, it's described as a pilot phase, allowing a maximum of only 50 patients per day, alongside a limited number of accompanying family members. This stark figure contrasts sharply with the estimated 20,000 individuals awaiting evacuation for urgent medical treatment, implying that at this rate it would take well over a year to process just those critical cases. Furthermore, Al Jazeera notes that while the crossing is open, the specific mechanisms for vetting and approving who can cross remain opaque, leading to significant delays and anxiety among those desperate for passage. There's a prevailing sentiment that this is a move more symbolic than substantive, aimed at placating international demands rather than genuinely addressing the overwhelming humanitarian catastrophe. The economic implications of this limited reopening are minimal. With no significant allowance for goods to pass through, the crushing economic blockade on Gaza remains largely intact. Local businesses continue to struggle with shortages of raw materials, disruptions to supply chains, and a lack of access to external markets. The prospect of economic revitalization, a necessary component for any long-term stability, appears distant under current conditions. The restricted movement of people, while offering a lifeline to a very small segment of the population, does little to alleviate the broader economic stagnation that fuels widespread poverty and desperation. Strategically, this partial reopening signals a complex interplay of pressure and political maneuvering. Israel's decision likely stems from intense international condemnation of the humanitarian situation in Gaza, particularly regarding the lack of medical access. By allowing a trickle of people through, Israel can claim to be addressing humanitarian concerns, potentially easing some of the external pressure without fundamentally altering its security posture or the broader encirclement of Gaza. For Egypt, hosting the crossing, the situation remains delicate. They bear the logistical and humanitarian burden of processing those who cross, while also navigating their relationship with Israel and the international community. The long-term consequences are concerning. If this limited access becomes the new normal, it risks normalizing a highly restrictive regime that still leaves the vast majority of Gaza's population in dire circumstances. It could perpetuate a cycle of dependency on intermittent, insufficient aid, rather than paving the way for sustainable solutions. The lack of free movement, both for people and goods, continues to stifle development, fragment families, and exacerbate social and psychological distress within the enclave. Moreover, the focus on individual medical cases, while critical, deflects from the systemic issues of infrastructure collapse, food insecurity, and widespread unemployment that are foundational to Gaza's crisis. This controlled reopening, therefore, represents a tactical de-escalation of a severe symptom, but not a fundamental shift in the underlying strategic conditions or a true resolution to the deep-seated challenges facing Gaza. Today, the key geopolitical developments centered on Israel's limited reopening of the Rafah border crossing and the shifting alliances in West Africa. Both events underscore the complex interplay of humanitarian needs, technological warfare, and global power competition. For our watch list in the next 24 hours. First, monitor the daily figures and processing times at the Rafah crossing. Any significant deviation from the reported dozens or a visible bottleneck will indicate the true efficacy and intent behind its reopening. Second, observe official statements from the U.S. and the West African juntas regarding their engagement. Look for concrete details on aid, security cooperation, or diplomatic initiatives, which would signal the extent of America's strategic reorientation in the region.